to return to the sources by producing Russian translations of the Fathers. Very often we find the Fathers saying things that we have been taught, or using language that we have come to use. For instance, in the marriage ceremony, we refer to the community of marriage. This is a remarkable expression, and yet we see it used in a canon in the council in Trullo, as it's called, 692 AD. It's used there in one of the canons in talking about marriage. I was doing some research on confession, and I found out, of course, that men and women went to confession at the altar table in the church. This, of course, is a great scandal to, all the modern Russians. But they went to confession at the altar table. And the question came up, well, what about hats? And the expression was used in many manuscripts. And if a man, he removes his hat, even if he wears a crown. And then I discover a manuscript, an obscure manuscript attributed to the 9th century, where it's used for the first time. That hats come off even if he wears a crown. And these things just, go down through the years and become part of our language. And we had that kind of stuff from the Fathers.
Father Paul, before we move to the common prayers, the question about sermon or sermons. We know that in Chrysostom's times it was few sermons during the service.
Well, I don't know if it was in the liturgy as such. We know the people gathered for matins.
Then 2nd century Justin the Martyr describes the Eucharist of that time, and he says that after reading of the scriptures, we called by the predstoyatel to imitate those noble things.
Yes.
So it's there. And
there's no question that the sermon.
Tell us.
It's no question that the sermon was, a link to the reading of Holy Scripture. We can even imagine, before the Gospels existed, we can imagine an apostle, or one of the 72, or one of the larger circles, standing up and recounting some episode or teaching in the life of Jesus, ad hoc. Then the Gospels were written, and we read the Gospel, but maybe, the original idea behind, the leader of the service, the giving an exhortation to actually put these words into practice, is maybe an outgrowth of this. But there's no question that in the tradition of the Church, the talk of the leader followed the readings of Holy Scripture. And it does make a lot of sense. Except today. I speak at the end. And a lot of Orthodox priests speak at the end. Many years ago I had a visit from a German priest who was running the ancient Roman cathedral in Worms, Germany. And his comment to me at the end was, sermon at the end, it works. But the Orthodox are so used to things moving along. We don't have any silences. We're uncomfortable with silences. Things move along. That the priest speaking, at the end seems intrusive. And I know this is, Father Schmemann, Father Meindorf, all preached after they read the Gospel. And this is correct. Homily is nothing more than the Greek word for talk. And the Latin word sermo, sermon, is just the word for talk. And it's part of the service. But today, I think we're free to do what works best in our parishes. It's nice if the priest does have something to say, and it's especially germane to the reading of the Gospel, it all being fresh in their minds. But today, our churches are very often empty at the Gospel reading, or certainly not as full as they will be later on. And so you catch more people with what you have to say, even though the people haven't heard the Gospel, by preaching at the end of the divine service. As you know, in Russia and Ukraine, during the Soviet period, every opportunity was used to say something. Before communion, after the Gospel. That's what Antony of Leningrad did when I was there, and I was impressed by what he had to say. I was really impressed that he had something to say.